Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin, where we unpack the strategies and solutions that make localization fast, scalable, and efficient. I'm your host, Stefan Huyghe. Good morning from Texas in the United States, and we're here with Steve Wiseman, the CRO of WritePoint. We're going to be exploring Steve's practical framework for improving the quality of AI-generated content and its impact on localization. And we're going to unpack how principles like content blueprints and structured input elevate content quality across languages, and how platforms like Crowdin can help operationalize and scale this approach globally. I love this technical subject, Steve, and I'm looking forward to putting your feet to the fire a little bit. Could you do us the honor and introduce yourself a bit more than the small introduction that I've made for you right now?
Sure. Good morning, Stefan. It's great to be here. I've actually got a nice relationship with Crowdin. In two companies I've worked for before now, we've spoken a lot. I have a lot of respect for Crowdin. Very, very quick company in getting things done. Very modern, gets things out way quicker than probably anybody else does. So you've always got my respect for that. And about me a little bit. So I've been in the industry. I was born in the UK, moved here to Israel 33 years ago. I won't quote my age. It's too embarrassing. And I've been in documentation ever since. I've run my own company for 25 years, providing documentation-related services, worked for Poligo, which is a product providing that type of product for writing in, worked for Refine for a small amount of time. And I've recently was asked to join WritePoint as a co-owner. They're a similar company that I used to run also here in Israel with an international reach, international reputation. And I can also implement some of my visions, which is the AI Content Excellence Framework, which is what you mentioned, which, by the way, isn't that technical, Stefan. You made it sound really technical, but it's not that technical.
I'm always weary when the techies say it's not that technical. It's probably way more technical than I'm capable of. But why not talk about the framework for AI-generated content a little bit? What problems inspired the creation of the AI Content Excellence Framework, Steve?
I'll be honest, I think everybody has the same pains that I found, just maybe I've found a creative way to solve them. Because when you write content, how many times does not quite end up as you want it to be? It could be inconsistent, there can be errors, the styles are different all the time, the source materials that you put in maybe not so consistent, which also affects the output. And then when you do this over a large scale, the errors become compounded, you get a bigger delta between what you wanted and what you were aiming for. And I don't want to jump the gun, but whenever anybody thinks of doing good AI, they all think of let's do good prompt engineering. That's what everybody thinks about. And I think it's only a small part of the game. Like my metaphor for AI is I always imagine I've got an expert employee working for me. That's AI. And if I don't give this expert employee, no matter how clever he or she is, really good instructions, background material, then they're not going to give me good results. No difference to AI. If I say to a guy, you need to write this and this and this and with some very beautiful prompts, but don't give him enough information, the result just isn't going to be sufficient. Exactly the same thing with AI. I kind of think, if I was dealing with a human, what would I need to give them? And that was essentially the motivation for doing this AI Content Excellence Framework. So it's not just prompt engineering, it's a lot more than that, to reduce all those pains you asked me about with the consistency and et cetera, et cetera.
It's really interesting. Why is this framework so important, especially for multilingual and translated content, you think?
So, I mean, I would say, I know this is a webinar for multilingual content, but the framework is the same relevance for creating content or translation, because it's all about getting the content right, getting it consistent, getting patterns that we know we can consistently follow. If we can go down those routes, then we're going to create content first time much quicker. The translation costs are going to be much reduced. Less revisions, better compliance. That's where we'll get when we use some sort of framework.
Yeah. And what common mistakes do teams make when they're feeding content to their AI tools? If we can talk about this in a very practical way.
Yeah. So, I've seen companies, and I've done it myself before the framework. You're not providing you're providing insufficient context to the AI. Let's put an example together. We want to create some sort of content in technical documentation. It could be anything, compliance, educational, right? And if I actually did a presentation on this a few weeks ago, and I did a demo in Claude, and I got some source material like a pretend transcript, a pretend spec with screenshots of what this feature was going to be about. And I just fed it with a prompt into Claude, and I got this result that was, it could have been anything. The instructions were not great. It didn't break it down in the same way. There was lack of, there was no rules really of how the content was written. Then on the same side, I'd created the different parts of the framework, which I guess we'll get into soon. But I told it how I want it written, how I want it structured, what kind of order I want it, the glossary, all the different information that I would need to give a writer in order to write something. And with virtually the same prompt, apart from saying take into account the framework documents, I got something that came out really well. I'm doing a project right now for a customer using the same framework. Actually, the content, I got a comment from him yesterday saying this is really good, with one or two comments. But I spent time to build the framework. Then I ran it through and I got content out how I expected it to be, in the language I expected it to be, in the structure I expected it to be. So for multilingual, for example, I would add requirements for multilingual, short sentences, the more simple languages, graphics with callouts, etc., etc. And I know I've got to have a verification process, but I know first time around, I'm going to get content that pretty nearly matches what I need.
It's very interesting. It's almost like you're saying you should write your content with multilingual translation in mind, keeping it in mind up front, so to speak, so that you make it easier for the AI to process it as such.
Yeah, I'll say something. That's not even to do with the framework. That's just good practice. Anybody who's writing content, maybe marketing's slightly different because there's terms of phrase and idioms that you maybe need to modify a little bit. But for content like technical documentation, compliance documentation, educational, where you want to get information over, if somebody doesn't prepare for multilingual, they're going to pay for it later. I personally think the most expensive and unnecessary part of a documentation project is localization. People put it at the end of the list. And if you do that, you're going to pay for it. I mean, and literally pay for it with lots of flashing dollars.
You're preaching to the choir here. This is something I've been hammering home about for a couple of years now, for sure. How do you think platforms like Crowdin can help companies adopt structured content practice at scale?
Okay, so there's really 4 parts of it, right? There's the content blueprint, source material organization, personas, and quality verification. Now, let me just explain a little bit of each one. So I've made up this term content blueprint because the real term in the market is called an information model. And the reason I changed it because it's ridiculously scary. For someone who doesn't know what an information model is, it's really scary. It sounds like academic. And that would put me off, okay? And for those who know what an information model is, it can go to 30 or 100 pages and it's scary of how on earth I go write such a large document to put in AI. So that's why I've changed it to a content blueprint. I don't mind saying what's beneath the bonnet there, but it's important to that. And what that basically does, it's more than just a style guide, which people are used to, the language I am to use. But it defines really from a top level, what are the kind of what are the documents I write? What are the structure of those documents? If I'm writing a certain document, what should the basic table of contents be? Then in each one you go in a bit more detail. Okay, so how, what the headings be inside there? What kind of style I'm going to like? What's the structure? I'll write a procedure, maybe, etc., etc. I go into a bit more detail. But the important thing is every single line that you add to a blueprint helps the output. So even if you start, and the AI can help you write these as well, okay? So even if you start with 2 pages, That's already 2 pages more than if you don't have a blueprint. And as you work on the content, you'll keep adding to the blueprint from things that you learn. And how I work with this as AI is I use Claude projects, but you can also use GPTs and maybe other functionality in LLMs. Okay, you've got this AI. We've just made these decisions. So can you just update the blueprint with these decisions we've made? It's really quick and easy to do that as an interactive process. But the more you put into it, the better the output is going to come. And that's where you get all the detail. It's phenomenal, because that's the key point to getting content out. So all your localization needs will be in that blueprint as well. So start off small and then later make bigger. So that's the blueprint. And if you've got any comments, I'll go to the source material.
Yeah, that it's really interesting because I've seen a huge improvement. I do a lot of work in GPT, and separating the content that I prompt in projects really makes a big difference. I assume that they're using RAG to teach the model in that particular project how to behave, and I can see that a lot of times I don't even have to prompt things anymore because the model already knows what's going on and answers the question in the way that it's learned how to do. How does preparing a content blueprint improve output quality, even for general LLMs like I just prepared?
Yeah, because you're basically creating all the rules. You could, in theory, put it into a prompt, but you're never going to, because you're not going to make a prompt that big. Everything you know about that content, the structure, the writing, the style, the branding, anything about it goes in that blueprint. And as I say, it could be the beginning, you don't know what goes in there. You make a standard one, but the more you start working with it, then you start modifying it. So if I was doing this without AI, before AI, it would be such a hassle to update the blueprint every time. But now it's quick and easy. I literally say, what are all the things we've learned from this chat discussion that weren't in the blueprint? And it'll tell me what they are. Now go and update the blueprint with these. So it's really, really easy and quick to improve what you're doing.
That's awesome. What are the minimum steps a team can take in order to see measurable improvements in the output, you think?
So you can actually do what I did in this presentation I did. This presentation I did about 2 months ago. I showed this, and then I did a demo. And the demo was, I said, without the blueprint and with the blueprint, also the stuff we haven't spoken about in the framework. So it's not just the blueprint. With and without. Without was pretty rubbish. With, people were flabbergasted. I said to the end of the presentation, and I wasn't allowed to sell, but I'm naughty sometimes. And I said, if I were to create a course, which we're creating right now, okay, to teach you how to do this, how many of you would pay right now for that course? And 75% of the people raised their hands because they saw the difference between with the framework and without the framework. And I'll be honest, it's not rocket science, but like a lot of things, it's just experience and to do it well and do it quickly. It's really just giving AI everything it needs to know.
Yeah. And now from a multilingual point of view, of course, how do you think teams could embed this framework into a localization workflow and in tools like Crowdin?
So the second one is the source material organization. It's that once you've set this up, you can take, and I did this for this demo, you can take a product feature guide, a Confluence page, a Jira tickets, whatever they are, and transcripts of any Zoom, Teams, or whatever you use for your meetings. Then you plug that in as organized source content with all the rest of this content, and you with the framework, and it gives you good answers. So it's a question of taking advantage of all the source content. I don't think people think of using transcripts from meetings because they have so much "how are you" and nonsense in there. But no, it's phenomenal. I just did it for this other project. The third thing are personas. Now, marketing use personas a lot. I found if I create a persona for AI, which often you put in the prompt, but what are you? What are you good at? But again, an AI can help you create it. It's not just 5 lines. It's really everything that AI needs to be. So in your case, it's also going to be an expert in writing multilingual content and writing it ready for content, but also a persona of the customer. Now, if you're writing for enterprises, you might have multiple levels. Maybe you'll have multiple blueprints or one big one. You might have multiple personas depending on what we're talking about, which audience we're talking about, but those go in. And the final part of it is some sort of verification process. And the verification process, I think, should be in a different project or a different GPT, but using the same blueprint. And just saying, this content that you've written, does it match the blueprint and the personas? And often when you do that second run through, you get even better content because it picks up. LLMs don't necessarily pick up every single thing they should do. So by running it through twice before you have really any human editing of that content, which you must have, obviously, you get really good content back. So that's what the framework was. I do remember the question now that you asked, Stefan. So you're asking how a company like Crowdin could take advantage of it. Now, I've actually made, using AI, a very quick, I did it for a couple of hours, a product spec, including screenshots of what this is. If something like Crowdin could build into its product an aid to creating the blueprint, to creating the personas, and become part of Crowdin itself. So when content comes into being translated, because normally Crowdin would use things like a glossary. But a glossary, you can see, is highly insufficient. It just touches one small element of what you need to know. If Crowdin can know the whole story about the content it's getting, then its translation will be much better. It could even go further. It could say, does this content even match the requirements of what it needs to be? Because you could always then go back to the customer automatically and say, after a review, we noticed that the content matches 70%, with 30% being inconsistent and wrong. Do you want to go back and improve your content? Do you want us to help you improve that content? Or shall we translate it anyway? So if you put that as a verification and a way of improving the localization as part of the product, then that could maybe be a differentiator. I say, I got that idea from you prompting me to do this webinar.
Yeah, that's good. You're fast. The more I listen to you, the more I realize how important structured and structuring source content is becoming. Can you maybe lift the bonnet, as you said, or the hood, as we say, a little bit, and indicate how that affects machine translation and multilingual AI output as well?
So I can't say I've tested it. So I'm kind of speaking a bit without playing with it beforehand. Localization needs rules just like anything else. You need patterns. You need to be able to expect what's going to come in. And every time something doesn't come in as you expected, the answer could be random. The answer might match what you need, might not match what you need. So if we do that first idea of verifying the content to see how it matches the blueprint, before you even start doing the localization, you can pick up problems before you even translate. Because every time you do a translation, it's not correct, and a customer needs to do another translation, it's a cost for the customer. So if we can verify first those parts in advance that we know have not been written in the way they need to be written and defined to be written, that's already going to reduce the costs for localization for the company. I'm not sure how many localization systems can actually do that type of verification. It's not just glossary based. Now, two, when we do that content, we're already setting rules of how we want it to be, what type of language we want from the output, any certain rules of how we're going to do things in localization. So the same way that we have rules for writing content, you also need rules for translating content. And the more rules that you have, the less likely we're going to have bad translations. So I think that's how it can affect. I don't want to throw figures around. I know regarding content, with the experiments that I've done, I'm reducing authoring content by at least 50 or 60% than writing manually, right? Because the system just gets a fantastic first draft out, and I can also verify and get that first draft even better. In localization, I assume it's similar, and maybe at the end of the localization process, we can again run it against the blueprint. Have we matched it? Have we not matched it? Do we need to improve again? So I'm sure we can bring down localization costs using a blueprint, but I wouldn't want to guess, because while I know your world, it's not my core expertise.
Yeah, content overlaps though, so it's very interesting to talk about this. Let's explore operationalize that framework across teams a little bit, because it's easy to say sitting in the chair here, but we know that making everybody play nice in the sandbox is not always easy. So what's the best way to introduce the framework to teams in an organization, you think?
Well, hopefully, as you can see, me talking like this, right, and it's not me being particularly a great speaker, right? The argument itself is convincing. If I go to a VP and say, I know I can reduce the costs or improve your efficiency, whichever way you want to word it, of content, that's a big why, right? The why is I'm going to make you more efficient. The why is going to make you write more content, right? The why I'm going to involve less edits. It's going to hit the button, or it's going to hit close. I don't like saying 100% because nothing can be, but it's going to hit closer to the button. We can do also what I said before. We can show before and after examples. This is content written, either you did it manually and it took you 100 hours, or it's something that I've taken your source content that one of your writers would do, and I've run it through randomly with just a nice prompt, or I've used a framework. And that's what I did in that presentation. And people basically went, you're looking for a wow moment? That was a wow moment. We can implement pilot projects. They start off small. Start off with a small blueprint. See how it goes. Say even one page of a blueprint is one page more than no blueprint or no persona, right? Do those small pilot projects. They can build a lot of confidence inside the company. And then you can develop a phased adoption. I'm telling you nothing unique. That's how you implement any project, right? And this was no different, but I just think you can get to a wow moment much quicker with this once they see the time it takes, or it doesn't take, and the quality of the output.
What types of teams and industries have the most to gain from implementing a framework, you think?
Good question. And I'll first give you a rubbish answer, okay? Anyone really. Let's go a bit more specific. So say regulated sectors like finance or healthcare, because the more rules there are, even more the blueprint is going to help, right? And they often need to make sure before they release it that actually matches all the things that you need. That should be part of the blueprint for before and the verification that I mentioned. Global enterprises, they need consistent content going out. What I always like to think is I can have anybody speak. I personally like speaking more than writing. You wouldn't have guessed that, would you, Stefan? But I like speaking more than writing, and I dictate so much now into AI. And I know it's going to take out even the words it writes wrong. It put very rude word in when I was dictating earlier, which was terrible. But it's able to extract all that, and I know I'm going to get good content out because I've got the framework, right? Also, the world that I naturally come from, which is technical documentation, that's such a good home for this. Whether they're writing regular content or writing one of these XML-based DITA or doc books, right? That's very structured. We want all the procedures to be written in a similar way with similar type of language, active, and et cetera, et cetera. So we and an order, a heading, a description, a screenshot, table, procedure, and that's part of the blueprint that we can define it. Any company with high volume content, that you need to get so much content out, and you want to make sure it's consistent.
And for us who are in continuous localization, do you have any tips to ensure that the framework is applied consistently across markets and content types?
So to be honest, I think it's the same answer I've given you already, unless I'm missing something from the question. That it's something that you would also. The secret is getting a kind of, I don't know, 50% decent framework when you're starting, and then just building on it as you go along. A company is going, either they know already. So if you're a company you've already done thousands of translations, then you already know kind of what should be in the blueprint, right? Or putting various things that you've learned from different places and using AI to help you create a consistent blueprint. Or if you're new doing lots of translations, you're going to learn as you go along. You're going to learn in Germany, it's best to write like this. In Japan, it's best to write like this. Maybe the structure of a document. It could be in I don't know, in one country, they like to see heading, paragraph, image. Maybe in other countries, they'd like to start with a heading followed by a procedure, then a table, whatever. We could even use AI in that point to not just to rewrite it, but to reorganize it according to what we'll put inside the blueprint. I mean, you can just see me. I'm thinking live here with you, and that's the beauty of it. We can learn and change on the fly as per need.
Yeah. I was thinking about what this means for the future as well. How do you see structured content principles evolving with multimodal AI and RAG and AI knowledge graphs, etc.?
Yeah, so I think people are starting to write in more structured ways already. I've even told some of the vendors who create content authoring tools that they're real, and none of them believe me, by the way, right? If any of them does, you're welcome to contact me, is I think the future is not in content authoring tools because people will be writing less. I'll be part of that. I'll be part of the people they can hate, right? Because you don't need to write as much, right? Because I think products like that, if they're structured, that can actually help people manage their structured content used for AI. So if you're writing in a naturally structured way, you've got all the metadata, which I've not really spoken about today. That's really what AI needs. So, and with our framework, it's naturally going to be structured, or people write in a structured way. We make sure that before we put anything in AI, or before we do anything with the content, we make it as consistent as possible. So let me rephrase that. Before we deliver it on the web, before we send it for translation, before we get it ready in a chatbot, we make sure that content is as structured as it possibly can be, with the right metadata, knowledge graphs, whatever you want to call it, and relationships for that content. And the quicker and easier we do that, then the quicker we can actually deliver. We can improve time to market this way as well. Like if you're manually writing content, I know I used to write content, it takes you 2 months. If we can do the same thing in a week, then, it's often, for example, a documentation needs to come out with the product. And the documentation can be a real roadblocker, right? Because you can only start writing the content often when the product feature is finished. So there's another, the lead time of a month. So if we can bring that down to a week, for example, then it's a lot easier to synchronize and get everything out quicker.
We're almost at the end already, believe it or not. We could probably go on for another hour or two. It seems like we're both passionate about this topic. I usually end on a Crowdin question, so I want to do that justice and do the same. From your experience working with Crowdin, what's the most useful aspect of Crowdin, or what do you like best of working with Crowdin?
So I've known the people. There's one particular feature I really like, but the people are great because I know your CEO. I've spoken to your partner managers. That's how I got to know you. And the people have always been very nice, very friendly, very genuine and very honest. No one's trying to say anything that's not true.
I'm very in tune with the customer base. Very easy to make adaptations on a regular basis. That's been my experience too.
Yeah. When I spoke to CEO about the implementation plan, I loved what he said. And if I'm quoting him wrong, then delete this or just say my memory messed me up again. But as soon as it came out, it was, let's try and implement it. But let's say it's beta and let the customers help drive the product. Or by another product, I noted the opposite. They waited for 2 years before implementing it, miles behind the time, and really don't have anything worthwhile to offer with AI that makes a difference. So the Crowdin in it was quick, be clear to customers, this is not ready, we're working on it together with you, and being able to change things. And you guys came out with a really good output. The feature that I really liked, which is not AI based, is the way Crowdin create workflows. You can actually manually drag different parts of the workflow. Many systems are too rigid. You follow this, or you don't. Whereby Crowdin actually allow you to make your own workflows, and every company has their own way of doing workflows for localization, even for authoring content. And I've always thought that was a particularly superb feature inside Crowdin.
That's awesome. I agree with you. That's pretty good. Thank you so much, Steve, spending some time with us this morning or this afternoon in Israel, I should say. I hope we get to do it soon again sometime. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stefan. I'd love to do it again. And I've heard my voice deteriorate over the last half an hour.
Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to learn more about how leading companies are managing their multilingual content efficiently, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in. For more resources on how to streamline your localization process, visit crowdin.com. See you next time.